The Seahawks have taken Byron Murphy, the defensive tackle from Texas, with the number 16 overall pick, and I'm a big fan of this draft pick. I wanted them to focus on the trenches. You know, for so many years, the Seahawks have been pushed around up front. I wanted to see either a real focus on the offensive line to build that up, or I wanted to see them go out and try and make the defensive line a real force. And the idea of seeing Byron Murphy next to Leonard Williams and Jaron Reed and sort of rotating him with some of those other guys, with some of the edge rushers that you've already invested in, and Mike McDonald's new scheme, it's a very exciting time for the defense. This is going to be a commitment to trying to fix that defensive unit, which just wasn't good enough in the last few years under Pete Carroll. And the Seahawks have really benefited from just the nonsense of this draft so far. You know, 6 quarterbacks going in the first 12 picks, 14 straight offensive players drafted. Listen, I know there are teams out there like Denver who feel we've got to get a quarterback, we don't have a second round pick, we're desperate, we've got to do this. But reaching on someone like Bo Nix through sheer desperation is not how you succeed in the NFL. And as much as I personally think the Seahawks still need to find a quarterback at some point for the long term, you know, the way that you do tend to win in the draft is to let it come to you. And with all of these other teams making what I would suggest rather foolish, needy, desperate moves, the Raiders have benefited with Brock Bowers dropping to 13. I would say the Saints have benefited with Taliese Fuaga dropping to 14. The Colts had their pick of the defensive players. I personally did not think Leatu Latu was the best defensive player in the draft, but they did, and they've gone for him, so that's their decision. And the Seahawks get Byron Murphy. I just think for me, it's a home run. And, you know, I was dreading all of this talk, as I did in my video before the draft, about Tarian Arnold and cornerbacks, and that they were going to do that. And when they got to the clock, there was part of me wondering here, are they going to take a cornerback and go that route with all of the cornerbacks to pick from? And thank goodness that they went for the trenches instead and went with Byron Murphy, somebody who, you know, is so explosive. I've been calling him the Cobra because the way that he can sort of sink down into his hips and then just propel himself and strike like a cobra, and just sort of explode through blocks. You know, he can anchor and play nose tackle. I mean, like, you think of T'Vondre Sweat. They played Murphy at nose tackle for a decent chunk of snaps last year because he can do it. Because he can anchor that line and he can hold the point and he can play the run. But then he can stun. I mean, this is something that's big in the Mike McDonald system. I think it's going to be in Seattle, is that they're going to have their outside rushers crashing into that offensive line and they're going to need somebody with the athleticism to stun. He can do that. He is just very athletic. You know, he just looks the part with this massive arse, massive thighs, but very minimal body fat. You know, he looks like top tier defensive tackles look. So I'm very happy with it. And for years, the Seahawks have needed what I would say game-changing defensive linemen, either off the edge or on the inside, and they had neither. And now you've got Leonard Williams, who can blow up a play. You've got Byron Murphy, who can blow up a play. And you have invested 3 second-round picks in your edge rushers, and you've paid your Chenra Nwosu. You now have to go and deliver with that. And I believe that Mike McDonald will, and with Aiden Dirty, will deliver with that. Now, I'd love for them to have another pick, either to go and get Troy Fatanu or Chop Robinson or whatever. You know, that would be fantastic. You know, it's a shame they don't have the stock they had last year. And it's a shame they're not going to pick in round 2 with some of the guys that are still on the board. But listen, I think it's a great pick. And I think that John Schneider deserves credit for doing what needed to be done. And I think it's a tremendous start to this NFL draft. And it sets them up for the rest of the draft now, for this to be a trenches-focused draft, which is what the Seahawks needed. I wanted to give a thought on Troy Fatanu. He was a player that I thought if he was there at 16, they would stick and pick. We then had the news. Tony Pauline was the first person to mention that news. By the way, people get at Tony. Tony told us on the show last Friday, Byron Murphy. That was the guy that he said. Byron Murphy to the Seahawks. They want Byron Murphy. And his update on the show was that he won't get to 16. He did, and they took him. So kudos to Tony for that, because people get at Tony. And then Tony was the first person on our show, on that broadcast that we put on our channel, to mention that Troy Fatanu had got a medical issue with the knee. And then Albert Breer was the second person to follow that up after Tony mentioned it to us on our show. And that seems like it sadly has been a little bit of a game changer for Troy Fautanu. Now, I would have loved him to be the pick and would not have complained if they took a chance there. But given that that was a thing, Byron Murphy, as far as we know, did not have any medical concerns. I think a good choice from the Seahawks to go in that direction. So, very pleased with the pick. Great start to the draft for the Seahawks. Good stuff. Happy with that. 2 thumbs up from me. What do you think about it? Let me know in the comments section. Give the video a like. If you like the channel, subscribe. Just a reminder, live stream coming up at the end of the first round. Robbie and I will talk more about Byron Murphy. We'll talk more about the Seahawks and this crazy first round of the 2024 NFL draft. But that's my instant reaction. Very happy with Byron Murphy, the defensive tackle from Texas, coming to Seattle.